up.
May oregano.
No. Oregano.
You know, the waxier, shinier the leaf, usually the healthier the plant. The better the skin, the higher the calcium. So then it'll be more insect resistant.
That's so much nicer than the oregano I have.
Do you have the small European?
No, big stuff like that. But
I call that one Mexican oregano.
yeah, I've called it.
It's not a real good culinary variety, but Filipinos like it for tea, for cough, and different cures. But here it is growing in the riverbed of aquaponics. And there we have watercress. That's another one for our leafy greens. That goes in a gourmet salad. And then you see the river meandering down, so there's lots of edge effect. And then this floating fern, this is Sylvania. And so that's a fish feed. We can give that to the fish. Or we can pile it up here and the earthworms will move into it. And then above, this is another method. This is the wicking. So in this cup, the nutrients are going up into the potting soil, fertilizing the lettuce, whatever we're growing.
Do you grow the lettuce full size in those cups?
Yep, that'll spend its whole life growing out. So we can, as a rule, our leafy greens grow about 50% more biomass in the aquaponics compared to direct planting.
No way.
And it also grows faster. Maybe 10 to 20% faster. But we do celery in the wick bag. But you don't have to. You can dangle the roots in water. So if you do that, like these are beefsteak tomatoes. So those vines you train and you keep moving them over as they get taller so that they don't go through the roof.
And they're only just in a cup.
And they're in that cup.
That's it.
Well,
Oh, wow. Hi. So that shows how big the tomato roots get.
how big they can get.
They can.
Right, yep. Compared to the lettuce just starting to come out. But that requires highly filtered water. Otherwise the roots biofoul. They won't feed properly. So that's why we have the riverbed. That's high volume, lots of dirty water cycling through there with earthworms. But through our finer filter, we have the aquaponics with the hanging roots, or what we call deep water culture. So that's more of a subunit. Requires more filtering. The challenge with the double-decker is getting stuff in the shade. Because we're not going to add grow lights, but in the U.S., they got all kinds of electricity flowing. Here's some agroforestry. So this is ipel, diba? So those will get transplanted out later. More tomatoes here in gravel. And then celery. Let me show you celery.
Wow.
So you can just do a single harvest, or what we do because of our customer base is we'll harvest some, every week or two off of the different plants, and then as it grows you get more new shoots in the middle up to a limiting factor, and then it starts to die off and produce seed. So again, you got to have the filtration of your suspended solids, otherwise these will clog. The hardest thing is getting it back. But at sea level, it's pretty tough to grow celery in the tropics. So that's about as big of a stalk as you can grow here. And of course, Filipinos use the leaves well as an herb. So in your, pansit?
Yeah, pansit.
Right, you like to do the leaf. So that's our biggest customers, our birthday parties.
Pansit.
This one, you can see we sheared it, we harvested it, and this one will be tomorrow or the next day. So watercress tends to wind down. It only gets so far and then it starts to die back. So So if you keep cutting it, whether you need it or not, you got to keep harvesting it or you lose it.
But this will keep
But,
going
yeah,
and keep
so
cycling.
feed it to your chickens. Put it in the compost, but keep it going. Watercress, you can taste it. It's like arugula. It's got a peppery flavor to it. This is the filtration you need. Here's the swirl filter. And you can see the chops, the tea.
Yep.
And it doesn't go down in this case because it gets your best water. But down here you suck out the solids that settled. And here the water's swirling there. You can barely see the water moving.
Yeah, but you can.
That's your flow rate. You could go a little faster, but about like that. Then, once you settle out those large solids, then you got the tedious job of catching the dissolved solids. And so here's a coarser foam. And to clean that, we backflow it. So as we drain here, see, the water passes back and the particles come out of the mat. We just kind of brush it.
You don't have to change
And now, right, we don't pull it out and destroy the matting. And right, if you've kept koi, you know the problem that is. So this is a backflow.
Wow.
And the water just goes to a gravel bed where the worms use the solids. So it's not like we're wasting water. So this one and this one we run daily. We clean daily. Then this one is weekly. It's a finer screen. But again, it'll backflow down here and clean itself. And then finally, go ahead. And you don't have to pump air, but if you do have air, you put it on the backside. That lifts the solids up to the next chamber where they settle. Because that's where we suck out the solids, is in front of the foam, in front of the filter matting. And then finally our finest two mats are green on the back. And that one we might empty once a month. Backflow.
Brilliant.
But of that 6,000 liters an hour that our pump moves for 150 watts, we only have this much going through. Because if we ran that big pump through all this, it overwhelmed the filtering system.
Ah, so it's only a partial bit that comes.
5 to 10% of a good system will be for your deep water culture and your tedious cleaning. That's why most of these fail. Everywhere I see, the roots are fouled. Nothing's growing because they're running all their water through this. And of course, this can be scaled up. But again, we want to have all the nutrients available in an aquaponic system. And that means some of it needs to be in gravel. Some of it needs to release the iron. Some of it needs to be there for earthworms. Some of it needs to be for biofiltration. So I like to do 5 to 10% as a spur. And now this runs this bed and the bed behind you with the tomatoes.
This bed and the tomato.
Right.
So
Right. Those are deep water culture.
Okay.
Those are the roots hanging out of the cup. And that's cut exactly to make no waste. So you lay it out so that the two edges and the bottom and the ends and all that, so that these two beds are like four plywood
pieces of
sheets.
Plywood, but just cut out economically. I love
And-
SketchUp for that.
Yeah, you can waste a lot of money on that and not mind.
But you can also waste a lot of time on SketchUp.
Well, yeah, then you're not saving money. So, and then the hanging raft, then we don't need air stones. So there's an air gap in there, so the water's already aerobic. But if it's a floating raft, like the smothered foam,
You need to put
you
it.
need to inject the air. And that's what we want to get away with, lower the wattage. Now, since this water's so well refined, cleaned, and polished, then when it's done here, it goes to our fingerlings and fry. Because we give them the best water possible. So if you come over here, we have another airlift pump. And here you can see that kind of sump there has an overflow, but at this flow rate, the air just lifts the water into this tank for the little guys and then the fingerlings, and then it goes back into the bigger system. Now the problem with aquaponics is your water is of such high quality, you never have algae to feed your fish for free. Remember the green water culture, and we're fertilizing the pond. That's great as an extensive, but this is an intensive system. So we grow our fry algae up here. So we just have sun, and we add a little bat guano in there, and now 5-6 times a day we can drop our green water in, and of course that'll get flushed through the system, but the fish will feed on that.
So you grow the algae, flush some in, and then refill
Yeah,
those.
it's got a little topper,
And
tops
then-
off, right, and that's in the sunlight growing the free food. See how much greener that water is compared to the rest of the system. Here's a shot of our regular water. That's tinted from the humates from the vermicast.
It's not dirty water.
But that's, well, yeah, it's real nice water, but very low in algae. So not an easy starting point, but a fun project if you don't have a lot of space. You have reliable electricity, a gen set, solar power, something to keep it going. Okay, who knows about black soldier fly?
The nerd.
So these are self-harvesting maggots. The black soldier fly doesn't land on food. It has no mouth.
We do this
It doesn't spread
for
disease,
the chickens.
but very good for chicken. Not great for tilapia. Some people feed it to tilapia. It's better used in chicken. But they climb up and they jump out into your bucket. So here they are wiggling or pupating or sleeping, depending on when you harvest them. You want to see the live ones?
Yeah.
So here's the kitchen garbage. We just throw our fermented kitchen garbage in here. But if you dig around, there you go. See the big maggots? So if your ramp is designed at about a 35-degree angle, they only pupate in soil. So they won't pupate in the garbage. So they'll climb up your ramp looking for soil. And when they get to the hole, they jump. They jump down and they get fed to the chickens. The problem with this for fish is the fat content. If chicken are on pasture and they're grazing, it's a good supplement. But for fish, it's just a little too much fat for them. So they'll eat them, like the big koi will eat them. And of course, they lay their eggs above the substrate. So you have to have a rim in there where the female can come in. So the female comes in here and lays her eggs above the waist. That way, when the eggs hatch, see, the offspring jump down into a feast
Where do they lay the eggs?
above the waist.
So they come in and
Yeah.
they fly
So
in
that's why
through-
we've got holes and cracks, and they'll lay them on the edge. Little dots you'll see. Those are the eggs. They like to lay. See, the blowfly, the filth fly, they lay their egg in the ta'i. They lay their egg in the food, in the rot, in the nasty. These guys lay above, and when they hatch,
They go down.
they eat and eat and eat. They eat all their life as juveniles, as pupa. When they come out adult, they have no mouth and never eat. That's why they're not a problem around human. You'll rarely see them in the kitchen or in the house.
How do you start them? How do you make sure you get them to begin with?
The problem is they will stabilize the substrate and dominate it and keep out the filth fly. So once you get hundreds of them in there eating, they release
They crowd out
a cinnamon, a pheromone that repels the filth fly. Until then, you're breeding both.
But how do you start them?
You give them the design.
So
they
you-
need a
so-
hatching area, a
so you
nursery
just-
above,
so you don't-
kitchen waste below.
and you just leave it, and they'll naturally colonize it.
Yeah,
You
because
don't-
they'll smell the food, and if they got somewhere to put their eggs above, now in the meantime you'll get other flies in there. But once they dominate, then they control the pile. Let's feed the fish. So here I know they already fed breakfast, and they already fed lunch, right? They're empty. So even though they just need to keep using the same pail, I've got 3 pails. And in the morning, this
They
one
fill up.
should be empty already. And by 1 o'clock, this should be empty. And tonight, so the rule is, after those times, if they're still full, you get to feed the fish.
Okay.
But you know how expensive it is to double feed fish? Oh, did Nick feed them? Did my wife feed them? Who fed them? Oh, maybe I'll feed them. Then you come by 10 minutes later. Hey, I like feeding fish. All of a sudden, you got all this fish feed and fertilizer in the system, but your fish aren't growing. So the idea, this is called ocular inspection or line of sight. And now after we're done with the big feed on all the big fish, there'll be some powder. We call those fines. So right at the bottom of any feed, you'll have crumbles. And that goes to our fry. Remember, we're giving them algae. And then if you look over here, 3-4 times a day, see them get all excited? How about over here? Once they see it. So at that size, you can feed them quite often. As they get bigger, you feed them less often. Here's the pelletizer. And of course, you can make different size depending on your screen. And there's an auger that extrudes it through here, and this kind of cuts it off as it goes and it rotates. Like a meat mincer, like hamburger. So we always take that off and clean it, but the machine's up there on the roof.